I'm here to tell you about a human rights abuse that's going on in Scottish schools as we speak. Yes, it's true. The rights of children are being denied, and Scotland's Children Commissioner has come to the rescue. This is a report in the Sun newspaper. Scots schools' strict uniform rules risk breaching pupils' rights. Now, I don't know about you, but when you see pupils coming in and out of Scottish schools, often I find the standard of uniform is so low that you think, why even bother? Shirts hanging out, ties down, ridiculously short skirts. I sometimes think, if you're not going to enforce uniform properly, it's probably better not to have it at all. But anyway, apparently the strict uniform rules are breaching pupils' rights. Just a little story from a friend of mine who's a teacher. And the school where he taught decided they were tightening up on uniform because the pupils weren't wearing their ties. Uniform policy was to wear a tie and they just weren't. So they said, you're not going to get served in the dining hall if you don't wear a tie. Pretty tough, eh? Then the deputy head stood at the door of the dining hall with a load of ties over his arm. And as pupils came along, he said, do you want to borrow a tie? And I want to borrow a tie here. Here's a tie, here's a tie. Then they give the ties out. They go and get served. And then give them back to him after they had the meal, and then carry on not wearing a tie through the rest of the day. I mean, what an absolute joke. And I think the probably situation is not dissimilar in many schools around Scotland. But anyway, let's read on more about this children's rights abuse that is going on. Strict uniform rules in Scots schools risk breaching children's right to an education, teachers have been told. Firm policies around schoolwear, including ties and blazers, has led to some pupils being disciplined. Disciplined, in other words, punished. So they're saying this is really bad. I mean, let's face it, the sort of establishment in Scotland, the so-called thinkers in education, the leaders, they generally think the punishment is out of order no matter what happens. Even if a pupil goes along and thumps a teacher, they don't think he should be punished. They think he needs, a bit more support, need to explore the issues that led him to, punch the teacher when he got annoyed with her. So they're against any sort of discipline, any sort of punishment. So the fact they're against punishment for not wearing school uniform is hardly a surprise. Anyway, let's carry on reading from the Sun. Bruce Adamson, Scotland's Children and Young People's Commissioner, has cautioned schools over disciplining children for wearing the wrong clothes. I assume he thinks that if they don't wear the uniform, nothing should happen. Well, that is what he thinks. We'll get on to that in a minute. So Scotland's Children and Young People's Commissioner. Who voted for him? No one. He's just sort of an appointee. And I think he's linked in with the sort of children's rights thing. That's his big emphasis. So he's listening to what the UN says. So basically, he is a power source in Scotland, a centre of power in Scottish education that's unelected and nothing to do with parents. He just imports the United Nations philosophy and imposes it, promotes it within Scottish education. Scottish Family Party policy, it wouldn't exist. Not him as a person. That job wouldn't exist. Okay, there would be no Children and Young People's Commissioner, but we would have more mechanisms for actually listening to what parents think. So he cited the United Nations Conventions on the Right of the Child. Here we go again. That's the religious text. It's the sacred text of Scottish education. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. If you look at that document, nothing in it is remotely relevant to anything that goes on in Scottish education. Virtually all of it is totally irrelevant. It's things like you can't torture children, you can't have the death penalty for under 18s, etc. But they managed to just take a few grey areas and interpret them wildly beyond the intention of the original document and claim that they mean various other things that they obviously don't. Mr. Adamson said, including the right to play and recreation, which he believes could be affected by stringent school dress codes. The right to play. Now, it does say you have a right to play. And I think what they meant was, you can't send children working down the mine for 12 hours a day, so they've got no time for playing. But he takes it, they've got a right to play. Therefore, if you have to wear a shirt and tie and a blazer, that inhibits your ability to play football at break time. Therefore, it's infringing your human rights. I mean, it's madness. It's utterly ridiculous. But where's the opposition? Have you heard anyone else in Scotland raising this issue of this bizarre children's rights madness? And I think you probably find the answer is no. I mean, the Scottish Conservatives, they oppose it, not a bit of it. I mean, any schools, any head teachers, any other teachers going to speak out publicly about it? Well, I hope that they will. Right, Mr. Adamson said, enforcing school uniform in this way breaches children's right to an education. Learning and well-being of children must be put ahead of what are in many cases quite arbitrary uniform policies. Okay, well-being. So saying you have to wear a shirt and a tie and a blazer, for example, or a sweatshirt or whatever else they have to wear, that impacts their well-being. What it really means is when a kid says, oh, I'm not going to wear it, I'm going to wear something else, and the teacher says, no, you can't wear that, you have to wear uniform. Okay, make sure you got it tomorrow or whatever. Sends them home to get it. I don't know what they do. Whatever they do, it says that impacts their well-being. So he believes that what really benefits children is that they learn they can get away with it and do what they like. They can break the rules, disregard the rules, and everything is just fine. That's what he thinks is proper education. That's what's really going to promote the well-being of children. But Mr. Adamson is wrong. He also thinks it undermines learning as well. So Mr. Adamson said, where schools do choose to develop a school dress code, this should be developed with the participation of all children and young people in the school, in line with children's rights to participate in decision-making. So there is a children's right about listening to children, and it's quite clear the context it's talking about in the actual text of the document. It's, for example, when a court is deciding which parent a child will live in, or which country they're going to live in, or whether or not they're going to be fostered or adopted. I mean, this sort of thing. It's about the really big decisions. That's the time it says the children really need to be listened to. But that's interpreted in schools as meaning the teachers can't decide anything. And basically no one's got the right to tell children what to do. Everything has to be negotiated. You have to agree and listen to what the children want as well and come to a sort of compromise. Then you've listened to them properly. So you can only have a school uniform if the children in the school want it. What if 60% want it and 40% don't? I assume there's 40% have got rights as well. So they've got the right to not wear it, I would guess. Well, let's see what he goes on to say. The dress code should be designed to support all aspects of children's education and well-being, to be flexible and comfortable, appropriate for all children, and to be suitable for activities throughout the school day. I mean, that's just brilliant, isn't it? I mean, do you think schools haven't worked that out? Is that not just obvious? Do we really need the heavy hand of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, like legal jargon, legal threats, to persuade schools that uniform has to be sensible? They have to be able to do the various activities they need to do with it. I mean, maybe for some activities, maybe you take your tie and blazer off, hang them up on a peg, and put an overall on and go and do design and technology or whatever. Is that allowed? Or is that infringing their rights, the fact that you have to get changed for some things? But it's a classic case that something that any school would have known in any case. Any school would be perfectly aware the uniform needs to be suitable without Mr. Adamson's advice. But he comes in as though he's the human rights campaigner. He's protecting these children from this terrible abuse. I mean, it's in a parallel universe. This includes being physically active, including during breaks, and being warm and comfortable. Okay, and in line with the legal position outlined, it must be voluntary. So in other words, there's no such thing as school uniform. I mean, how can it be a uniform if it's voluntary? It ceases to be a uniform. Okay, because some people won't wear it. One of the advantages of school uniform is it does just instill a sense of discipline, of pupils feeling you can't just do as you like. There's some structure here, and you have to operate within it. You might like it, you might not, but just that's the way it is. And while you're participating in the activity of that institution, you have to follow the rules of it. The same as you do with virtually any job that you go into in later life, and virtually any organisation or activity that you're going to be involved in. The same sort of thing is going to apply. But he wants them teaching that no one can apply rules. No one can apply rules. It's always got to be a choice. Everything's got to be voluntary. So basically he's saying you have to scrap school uniform. Right, let's carry on. He added, yet we continue to hear of situations where children are being disciplined for failing to wear correct uniform. including being placed on detention or being denied permission to take part in school activities. Well, that sounds perfectly reasonable to me. If someone persists in willfully refusing to wear the right uniform, then if they're punished for it, that is absolutely fine. Whereas Mr. Adamson, at our taxpayers' expense, he wants to turn all the pupils into barrack room lawyers. So when the teacher says, no, you're not wearing a uniform properly, do your tie up properly, you've got no right to tell me that. Mr. Adamson says so. I've got a right to wear whatever I like. If I don't want to wear my tie, I don't have to. That's my right. I mean, is that really the sort of education that he wants? Well, in Scotland, that's the sort of education that children are getting in schools in many, many cases. And that's the direction that the government and the educational establishment keep pushing us in. But yeah, so Mr. Adamson really does believe he's fighting injustice here. He's in a parallel universe. But this promotion of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and this sort of misinterpretation of it, is rampant in Scottish schools. I mean, does a school near you have the rights respecting school badge, or are they working towards it? What that means is they're swallowing this flawed ideology, hook, line and sinker, and they're basically shooting themselves in the foot. They're undermining their own authority and undermining discipline in their own schools. And so teachers might one lesson be teaching the children, basically no one's got the right to tell you what to do. And then the next lesson, the kids might be playing up and being an absolute pain in the neck. I hope they put two and two together and realise that that's what they've just been telling them. The adults, the teachers, whoever, should not have authority over children. But it's a bizarre blindness that the schools, as I say, just shooting themselves in the foot. The Conservative Party, do they oppose any of this? No chance. Not interested, don't understand it, not a word to say about it. So voting Conservative doesn't have any impact on this at all. But if you ask any teacher in Scotland, you say, what's the problem in your school? It's the problem that the pupils are sort of downtrodden and timid and afraid because they're so oppressed by the adults in their life. Or are they more likely to say, to be honest, it's a little bit out of control, there's quite a bit of bad behaviour, the kids are quite argumentative and stroppy, disobedient? I suspect you'll hear more of the latter, but Mr. Adamson thinks that the real problem is the former. It's the children are oppressed and bound up by rules and regulations and crushed by adult authority. As I say, in his parallel universe, he thinks that is the problem. So that's a little insight there. So let's see what happens with school uniform in the future. Scottish Family Party policy. We don't have one specifically about school uniform, but we do say that there should be modest dress in schools. Some of the outfits that pupils, particularly girls, wear, I would say, are inappropriate, shall we say. So do join the Scottish Family Party. There is a link below. And if you're interested in being a candidate in the forthcoming Scottish Council elections in May, it's not too late to apply. You can either be an active or a less active candidate, but if you're interested in that, email chairman@scottishfamily.org and we would love to hear from you.